Today, we are very, very excited to have Kate Lazarus, Senior ESG Advisory Lead Asia Pacific from the IFC, the International Financial Corporation of the World Bank. She's going to speak about women in the power sector in Nepal, trying to give us an idea about the landscape, what it is like, the key barriers, the programs they're doing to increase the number of women in the sector in this country. So welcome, Kate. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about, what it is like of the power sector in Nepal and a little bit about the program that IFC is doing there.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation to join. So we've been running a Powered by Women initiative in Nepal. Why have we been focused on the power initiative? Because in Nepal, hydropower is increasingly being considered as a reliable and an affordable and clean energy source of energy that can contribute significantly to both Nepal and, of course, the South Asia region. So with Nepal's capacity to develop the hydropower sector, we found that there are a number of barriers for women to engage in this sector. So we've started over the last few years to do some analysis, first looking at some of the environmental and social risks of the hydropower sector and how to ensure that they're addressed, identified, how we can mitigate and manage them among a number of different stakeholders. And through the course of this analysis, we also found that there's huge opportunity for Nepal's female population to engage in the sector. So you can see that Nepal's female population is half of the population of Nepal, and that over 85% of women are participating in the workforce, but many of them are in informal or low quality jobs. So we do see that across the South Asia region, representation of women in the energy sector in Nepal is quite low, and that there is a potential and there is an interest. So in 2019, we started to do some research with 20 hydropower companies in Nepal to identify some of the barriers, some of the challenges, and to determine that interest to really engage in a campaign, in an initiative to address these barriers. And we finished the initiative in June 2023. So we found that through our baseline analysis that the status of women in the hydropower sector is particularly low, that only 10% of those 20 companies that were part of the baseline research are women, and only 8% are in executive roles, and even lower in technical positions that are held by women. So as, project managers, as engineers, and so forth. So overall, there's low status of women in the sector. And we know from our research across the region, as well as IFC's prioritization of gender globally, that there's a business case for addressing gender diversity and gender equality in private sector development. We know that by including more women in the sector, this can help to create a greater talent pool. There's opportunities to increase innovation and address environment, social, and governance and sustainability issues. There's also linkages to positive organizational change when you have that greater diversity. Stronger performance, of KPIs and so forth, increased productivity and better reputation overall. So that broad business case really gives us, an opportunity to look at what's really happening within the hydropower sector in Nepal and where that opportunity is. So we developed what's called the Powered by Women initiative. It actually draws from an initiative that we first started in Myanmar, and then we replicated it in Nepal. And it builds off of IFC's She Works campaign, where you set an actually time-bound initiative. So you have companies that sign up to this initiative over a period of time where they need to commit to certain areas of focus, and then we work to help and build their capacity to be able to reach the commitments that they've chosen. So when we launched the initiative in 2020, 19 hydropower companies, including the Independent Power Producers Association of Nepal, which is like the leading industry association, joined the initiative. We created this peer learning platform for companies, and we spent the next 2.5 years providing guidance, capacity building trainings, and learnings. Each of those 19 companies had focal points, and those focal points were sort of the leaders of the initiative, backed by their managing directors and their boards, and 24% of them were also men, because male champions was really a strong part of this initiative. How can we address the differentiated issues and impacts associated with both men and women? And so through the initiative, we identified 4 key entry points to address gaps within the sector.
Kate, I have a quick question for you. What is the incentive for companies to join this program? Yes, there's training, there is strategic guidance provided, but apart from that, what drove them to join this 2-year program?
Mm-hmm. I think that they saw that there's an untapped market on the one hand, and we actually commenced prior to actually launching the initiative, we did a very comprehensive gender and hydropower training in Nepal as a way to talk through some of these business case aspects and why there are the benefits of bringing more women, and to really drill down into some of those barriers. Some of those are contextual within the country in terms of cultural norms. Some of them are related to STEM education, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and the linkages between, women going into, more engineering type degrees, but not really being able to find the connections with the companies. And some of them are really behavioral issues. And so if you could try to sort of talk through initially these barriers and what it means to bring more women into the sector, we found that there was actually a huge interest. Not to say in the beginning that they knew where they would be at the end and that it would actually be a firm benefit to them, but there was strong willingness. And also because IFC had been working with many of these companies on broader environmental and social issues, they saw that this, was something very interesting, that they could also gain a lot of knowledge and training and capacity building, and really work with their management to make these changes. So they saw the business case, but they weren't sure how to, get there.
Got it. Kate, we can go on with the rest of our presentation.
Okay. So the 4 key entry points that, we were working to address the gender gaps within the sector were around women in leadership, respectful workplaces, and addressing risks associated with gender-based violence and harassment, women as employees, and as in particular in Nepal, a subset on women in non-traditional roles, and then women as community stakeholders. And here we're really looking at how can you, through these entry points, how can you promote business growth and efficiency and enhance sustainability to really increase that gender diversity in leading hydropower companies in Nepal? And how can we improve outcomes for women, both at the corporate level, so within the company itself, as well as within the project level, and for the communities affected by hydropower development. So at the end of this initiative, we did online surveys following up on the original baseline analysis. We carried out, focus group discussions, and we tried to look at, how this was really contributing to the overall initiative. And we definitely see a very strong community of practice of women and men who are part of the initiative and who really found comfort in working together and trying to solve some of these solutions within the country. And so just to run through a couple of the key results within the 4 commitment areas that were made among the 19 companies. So companies could sign up to more than one commitment, and many did. And in the women in leadership role, we're here looking specifically at, how to get more women in senior management positions, how to get more women in board or executive committee positions. And we found also some of the barriers around, confidence among women. So we actually did a communications training to help the Powered by Women members to build up their confidence, to be able to discuss and fight for themselves in terms of their role within a company. And so we did see a 19% increase in women in leadership positions by the end of the initiative, and that was a 7% increase on boards and 12% increase in managerial roles. In addition to that, as part of boards, we saw a 53% increase in companies having women-led committees. So this was really to amplify, the voices of women, and that there was more training being provided for women in the company so that they could learn, new skills and be able to advance upwards. The second component was really around respectful workplaces. And this was quite a big component because when we started looking at, our investments in hydropower, issues become, raised around, working in remote areas, working where you do have a lot of migration of workers coming from, say, within Nepal or from some of the neighboring countries to help in, constructing hydropower projects. And this can really change the dynamics on the ground for women. And so delving deeper into, what are some of the family-friendly policies that companies have, what are the human resources policies indicate around, family-friendly and gender-based violence related issues. And so we did a number of trainings around, what is sexual harassment, what is gender-based violence and harassment. We started to roll out some tools that IFC was piloting, and we did some direct gender advisory to companies who are interested in this area. And we did find that through the initiative, 106 policies were either formalized or improved around gender-friendly or family-friendly provisions, including gender-based violence, harassment, risks, management, and prevention of them. And so that's quite significant because that's reaching over 1,075, employees across the different companies. And so you can see that in addition to that, companies are investing in staff development and capacity development training around these areas. And we also looked at issues associated with absenteeism, because IFC has done research across the region and many different markets, finding that, women are often absent from the workplace because of issues associated with GBV and respectful workplaces and concerns around coming into work, either something occurring within the company itself, in the office or even at home. And so through this initiative, we found that 88% of the companies reported reduced absenteeism, which is quite a significant number. The third area around, women as community stakeholders, this is really focused on the differentiated impacts associated with men and women on the ground from hydropower projects. And so here we're focusing on, how companies disaggregate their data. So for example, 8 companies really put focus on disaggregating their data by gender. 7 companies focused on putting in place a more robust grievance redress mechanism at the community level, and adding in special provisions to make them more accessible to women, because the grievance redress mechanism is that mechanism at the community level where local stakeholders can raise concern about project-related impacts, and often we see that they're not accessible to women. They may not be in appropriate language. They may not be having greater awareness as to what are the mechanisms or the steps that are taken for women to raise their concern, and how then those concerns are being addressed. We also saw, as part of that, 5 companies, including a particular response related to GBVH, which can be very sensitive. You need confidential mechanisms in place for that. And other areas, such as how do you engage more women in consultations when they're working in the field, or they're collecting water, or they have childcare responsibilities. So 7 companies, providing meals and childcare support for community women during consultations, and then identifying and hiring, female stakeholder engagement or community liaisons. So there was quite a, strong effort among the companies that committed to this commitment to raise awareness among community stakeholders. And finally, within the space of women in non-traditional jobs, as mentioned earlier, we're looking at some of the challenges and barriers to getting more women as project managers in the field, or as engineers on projects, or as security guards, or working in the field, related to the construction of the project. And there's very few in this area, but now there's been a 7% increase in recruiting in non-traditional jobs, and this resulted because of more investment in trainings in these non-traditional roles, as well as really linking and identifying the barrier. So one simple mechanism is how you prepare the terms of reference for certain positions. So being able to, make them more accessible and holistic and inclusive to hiring of women, and also starting to change, some of the barriers, particularly those, raised by men, that women would not want to work in remote areas, that the conditions are not conducive for women to, be based there. And these are, small things that companies can really do in terms of making sure that on-site accommodation and project-related infrastructure is more gender-friendly and inclusive. And so our team also worked, together with our gender colleagues to do like a gender audit, for example, of one of the companies, to assess on the ground, what some of the issues were and how to make improvements.
Got it. Got it. Kate, thank you. This has been a really comprehensive, overview of the program. A question for you is, you spoke about, organizations and the barriers that they might, face, and some socio-emotional learning they would have done during this time, during the period of 2+ years, where they kind of, their blinkers went off. They started thinking about their policies deeply, more deliberately and intentionally. I was curious to hear, from women, how do they perceive a career in the hydropower or in the power sector in Nepal? Why is it because there are fewer women that complete engineering degrees, or is it fewer women who actually go on to not take these jobs in the sector because of the different perceptions or the work environment that is already there, like going on the site or working in factories, of course cultural barriers, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these are barriers. When we worked with some of the organizations focused on like 3rd and 4th year university students, we found that they were going into the engineering field, and part of the way in which the educational system is structured, you're told or to go into a particular area of focus. You have very little opportunity to to make changes within that. And there was on the one hand, lack of interest to do that. Two, I think the gaps between, you know, graduates and the actual sector is quite large. So there hadn't been so many linkages between the companies and the educational institutions to, you know, get interest in coming and also make it an interesting and viable place to work. Many people, you know, want to work obviously in a company that they're well regarded and that it's a happy place to work and they feel safe and that they're adding value. And so when you enter into some of these very male dominated sectors, you know, these big changes need to be made, you know, to ensure inclusivity and diversity. And in Nepal, you know, the hydropower sector is very homegrown. There's a plethora of Nepali local hydropower companies who have been for years advancing the sector themselves. And they really haven't, you know, focused on these issues. At least 10 or so years ago, when we started talking about gender among these hydropower companies, it was not something that they saw as an issue, something that they should focus on or needed, really. And so once you started to delve deeper into, you know, what are some of the barriers associated with it, of course, there are cultural norms. As I mentioned earlier, there's behaviors that need to be, you know, addressed. And also they need to see, you know, as you asked before, like that incentive, why should I diversify? Why is it a benefit to my company? It sounds like I have to actually spend more money because I have to train, you know, these women coming into these jobs, and I need to, you know, do more than I would have to do. But, you know, I think, of course, not all companies are willing to put in those resources and effort. And it's also not only the responsibility of individual companies, but it's about how you can create also a ripple effect across the market. So everyone's doing it, then everyone wants to get on board. And that's what I think what we saw, at least among the 19 companies. And because we had the Independent Power Producers Association of Nepal, a huge network, you know, with over 250 members. This also, you know, created a ripple effect across their association. And we had a MOU with EPAN to also support in their commitments. And they did make commitments to diversify, you know, their executive committee. So now they have 4 women on their executive committee and, you know, within the leadership. And they also have been really promoting the benefits of women in the sector. And that obviously makes a huge impact for everyone else.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that, Kay. That's very helpful. I have one last question for you. Through the program, what are the type of challenges that you'll face? I'm sure initially, you know, there would have been a lot of outreach to kind of for them to understand, buy into the concept, to commit to trainings. For this period of time. Can you share a little bit about, you know, were there any challenges or roadblocks while you were implementing the program itself, and how you all went about, you know, dealing with them?
Yeah, certainly. Definitely, it's not necessarily a smooth process, and it takes a lot of time and effort among, you know, our team. And we did have, you know, a number of colleagues, you know, working and coordinating, you know, with the companies on a regular basis. So, you know, I mean, even stemming from the beginning when you're trying to gather baseline information to get, you know, an understanding. There's a lot of effort put into, you know, just really sitting down and speaking with companies around these issues when they've never actually, you know, talked about them before. So that was one barrier. And of course, it translates back at the end when you sort of trying to compare and contrast between the baseline and the end line. One of the key focus of the initiative with the focal points is really around making sure that the managing directors or the CEOs, you know, the leadership of the company is also on board. So we had quarterly roundtable meetings where we would invite, you know, the senior officials from the companies to come and to support, you know, their focal points, which also could be at various levels, you know, within the company itself. We wanted to make sure, you know, that they would have the necessary support. So you obviously you see a diversity. Some are very keen and support their focal points, and some may, you know, have supported their focal points less. I think when we start to delve into topics such as gender-based violence and harassment, of course, this is very sensitive, and you often get a, you know, a quick response. That doesn't happen, you know, in our project. That doesn't happen in our company. But when you start to try to break that down, and we had to start also with training and, you know, defining what are these issues. And when you start to do that, then people realize, oh, you know, that's sort of happening, right, in my company. I didn't recognize it in the same way, but now that I understand what this means, I'm actually seeing that it's happening. And I thought that that was just the norm of, you know, working in this company or in Nepal, but actually, and there may be some norms associated with that, but in reality, this is not okay, right? And so, you know, this also takes a lot of time and effort to explain and also to enter into uncomfortable, you know, conversations and situations, you know, to really try to come out, you know, more positively on the other side. So some of these aspects were, you know, challenging. In addition, I wanted to, you know, mention about the men. I mentioned earlier that, you know, we had 24% of our focal points were men, and we really, you know, try to put a lot of effort into showing that, you know, having male champions is good for business and good for diversity. And so, you know, we did end up seeing over time, you know, that we had a lot of men participating in our trainings. And I think globally for IFC, across many of these types of trainings on gender, Nepal had, you know, some of the largest percentage of men, you know, participating in the trainings. And they also were significantly interested, and they also started to, you know, be a bit introspective and see some of the you know, challenges that they faced, the way in which they communicated, or things that they had done in the past, which they could, you know, make some adjustments to be more inclusive. And so this was, you know, just a challenge for us to make sure that we were really drawing, you know, upon them and making sure that they were also feeling involved and included. And I think this is one of the you know, positive outcomes of the initiative, is that we do have a good diversity of both men and women that are trying to advance, you know, the diversity of the sector.
Thank you, Kate. You know, I think that is so important, right? You know, you can't just speak to a room full of women, because it is a workplace filled with both men and women. So that's incredible that you all could, you know, get 25% or more men to be part of the program. Hope, you know, in your next programs in your other countries, you all get 50% focal points, and sometimes even more, to facilitate. And because sometimes their voices, if we like, when we like it or no, might be heard more clearly when it comes to, you know, being more sensitive about concerns related to gender-based violence, or some of the relatively subtle you know, nuances at the workplace. So thank you, Kate. This has been incredible. Thank you for sharing all the information. Soon, I know we'll be you know, chatting with people who have actually, women and men who've gone through this program and made these changes at the country level, at the at the community level, at the company level, and also women who have, you know, grown in these roles and advanced during this period. So please find all the related information links in the description. Thank you again, Kate.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.